It's never too
Jason?
Check.
Yeah. I don't think it is old. Yeah. Which started in yes, yeah.
No worries. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wyoming State Board of Land Commissioners Teton County Working Session. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules today to join us. Before we get started, I'd like to thank those who pulled out all the stops to make today happen. From Teton National Park, we have Superintendent Chip Jenkins, Jeremy Barnum, Gopal Nujibel, Aaron Roth, and countless others. From Jackson Lake Lodge, we thank Alex Klein and Shannon Whalen. Our lunch and reception sponsors, Grand Teton National Park Foundation, we thank Leslie Matson and Mark Berry. Our coffee sponsor, Wyoming Outdoor Council, Lisa McGee. Thank you all very much. Thanks also to Marguerite Herman, the Advocates for School Trust Lands, the National Association of State Trust Lands, and of course, our Wyoming State Board of Land Commissioners, who I will introduce to you. We have Governor Mark Gordon, Secretary of State Ed Buchanan, Auditor Christy Racinas, Treasurer Kurt Meyer, and we have on the Zoom Superintendent Jillian Baylor. Thank you all as well for taking time out of your busy schedules. I also wanted to thank the Office of State Lands and Investments. Thanks to Deputy Director Jason Crowder and our staff for organizing this meeting. We have here today with us, we have Polly Dyer, Ben Bump, Sean Biggs, and Tyler Sino. And also thanks to those in Cheyenne that worked hard to get this together. And just as an aside, I would note that Deputy Director Crowder, if the deputy gig doesn't work out, I think he's got a new career as an event planner. So thank you, Jason, for all of your work. So the genesis of this meeting really stems from House Bill 162 and House Enrolled Act 83, which was came to fruition in the 2020 legislative session. That legislation required that the Office of State Lands conduct a study related to possible revenue generation and development opportunities for state trust lands here in Teton County. We did conduct that study, and the board received a copy of our report. I think it was in November of 2020. There were over 200 pages of information gathered in that report, and that report contained many different opportunities and options for the use of state parcels in Teton County. There's everything from conservation ideas to glamping and numerous other things. The results of that study were also shared with the legislature. Current total revenue from all parcels in Teton County is approximately $123,000 annually, or approximately just 1% of our total surface revenue. And when you're talking revenue versus land value found in Teton County, it kind of creates a different discussion compared to other state parcels across the state. So OSLI thought it would be a tremendous opportunity to bring the board to Teton County to learn about and explore revenue generation opportunities. And discussion really means a lot more if you can actually view the parcels and understand some of the proposals that have been made. So that's why we're here, to discuss the state trust land parcels in Teton County, to explore some of the revenue generation opportunities and to view some of the higher priority parcels. We believe that this working session will help the board in its future consideration and deliberation concerning some of these opportunities for state trust lands in Teton County. And when it's all said and done, OSLI will be looking for direction from the board with respect to next steps. Thanks again, everybody, for coming, and thanks again to the board for coming to Teton County. We look forward to a productive and informative day together. And before we kick off the meeting, Governor Gordon or members of the board, is there anything you folks would like to say? There are microphones on the table.
Well, thank you, Director Scoggin. It's wonderful to have everybody here. This is obviously an ongoing and very important discussion because the assets here are unique and the opportunities here are sometimes a bit different than what we see elsewhere. And so I really am looking forward to today's discussion. And thank you and the staff of the Board of Land Commissioners also for putting this all together. Thank you all for being here today.
I'll just say I'm just saying that I'm here to listen to you and find out what your concerns are and what the I guess the local direction that in the input that you're having. I think that's why we're all here. And so my ears are going to be open, my mouth is going to be shut. So for the most part, thank you.
And quickly, I want to thank the Park Service, Chip. Thank you so much, Craig. It's nice to be in the Craig Thomas building, which I remember being here when it opened. So.
Thank you, board members. And with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Chip Jenkins for his opening remarks.
Governor and members of the board, thank you very much for arranging to have your meeting here. Everybody else, thank you very much for turning out today for what will be an interesting discussion. So I'm relatively new. I'm the new superintendent here. I've been here a little bit over 6 months. And virtually everybody in this room probably knows more of the history than I do. But part of what I understand is about 100 years ago, the residents of Teton County saw the future here and helped to advocate for actually the setting aside of the range because I saw that preserving that was going to be central to their economic livelihood going forward. Over the next many decades, there were contentious conversations, there were hard conversations, there was hard-fought compromise over the creation of the national park. And I think that being the new guy here, I'm feeling that what I consistently hear from members of the community from around the state of Wyoming is a tremendous amount of pride in having one of America's crown jewels here, a tremendous amount of pride in having land that is vital to Wyoming's wildlife, for elk and deer and pronghorn and many other species. Pride in terms of being a keystone piece of the hospitality industry for the state. And we have an opportunity here in terms of going forward of preserving and enhancing that legacy. I think we also recognize, we in the National Park Service, we clearly recognize whether or not you make your living in the energy sector or agriculture or livestock, or you work for the National Park Service. We are all deeply invested in making sure that we have good schools, that we need sustainable funding for our schools so that we can educate our children to be able to be good Wyoming citizens. And we are optimistic that we can build on the work of generations before us, that we can be able to try to figure out a path forward to be able to build on the legacy that meets the needs of Wyoming schools while continuing to preserve really important habitat for Wyoming's wildlife. So we deeply appreciative that you were willing to take time out of many demands to be able to come here and participate in learning more about this very special and magical part of Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. So we'll start our discussion topics today. First, we'll begin with kind of a history of state trust lands in Teton County. Deputy Director Crowder is going to kind of set the stage for the board and talk about 6 of 13 Teton County parcels. I believe there's 13 that are described in your materials, board members, but we will focus on 6. So with that, I will turn it over to Deputy Director Crowder.
I'm sure that's working. Mr. Chairman, we thought it'd be a great idea, as the director mentioned, to give you the board just a little bit of a background on a few parcels, specifically the ones that we're most focused on within the county. And like the director mentioned, within your packet, you do have a PowerPoint presentation of all the parcels within the county and some of the details around them, but I'll just pay attention to a few of them in the interest of time. I'll also share my screen. Folks in Zoom land can see what we're. Mr. Chairman, I would turn your attention to slide number 2. This is the parcel that is very interesting. It has the high school on it, actually. So one great benefit of school trust lands is that you can put schools on them as well, and the statute allows us to charge those at a cheaper rate than most others would pay, and that rate is $100 per acre. Additionally to that school that's on that parcel, we have 2 cell towers on it that generate significant income for the beneficiaries. This parcel was acquired in 1973 via a warranty deed from Lois Laisley. Lastly, I'm going to butcher every name I discussed today. I apologize. But Lena Idle and Lauren Idle. We are continuing to add new uses to this parcel and having continued discussions for expansion of the school and the school administration building in that area. And again, I'd offer anytime you all would have any questions for me, I'd like to just make this into a discussion instead of me explaining things to you. So stop me at any point, we'll answer any questions. The next parcel I'd like to highlight is on slide number 5. This parcel is in the southern portion of Teton County. It's affectionately known in our office as the Munger Mountain parcel. It does have the Fall Creek County Road going through it. It was acquired at the act of admissions. As you all know, the state of Wyoming was granted all of its lands, most of its lands at the in 1890 when we were entered into the Union, and this is one of those. It does have 1 grazing lease on it, and also it's important to note that the board did restrict this parcel, and we did so in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service to manage the recreational component in that area. So we are coinciding with some Forest Service restrictions as far as road closures and usage by motorized vehicles. We did expend some TP&E funds to help bolster the road going into a parking area, and we also constructed a parking area. we will catch up with technology here soon, Mr. Chairman. The next parcel I'd like to turn your attention to is slide number 7. This parcel is highly visible from the town of Jackson. It's really the face as you're looking into the mountains from the town of Jackson. We have a lot of uses on this parcel, independent of its extreme topography. Currently, the Teton County Search and Rescue Facility is on the parcel, as well as a water tower to the town of Jackson. It was acquired as well through the Act of Admissions. It's important to note that this is not a section 16 or 36, so it's not benefiting the Common School Fund, but it is benefiting another beneficiary that was identified through the Constitution when the state came into the Union. We are actively looking at other uses on this parcel as well, simply because it does have some somewhat friendly topography in a small portion, and it's very close to the town of Jackson. It presents some opportunity for discussion there. Mr. Chairman, the next slide I turn your attention to is number 12. And this is an interesting parcel, number 12. It lies in the northern part of Teton County. And the reason I wanted to highlight this, not only did it come through it to us from the Act of Admissions, but it is the only parcel where we currently have a conservation easement placed on it. That conservation easement is with the Jackson Hole Land Trust, but it is the only parcel within the whole state of Wyoming where a conservation easement sits on top of state trust land. And Mr. Chairman, the next one I point your attention to is slide number 15. Mr. Chairman, we will be touring this parcel later today with the board, but it is the parcel that we affectionately call the Highway 390 parcel. It lies just south of Teton Village along Highway 390. It's got a grazing lease on it as well, and it's one of the most lucrative grazing leases we have, simply because of the amount of AUMs that are present. There are great irrigation channels that provide great forage availability. It also has a lot of commercial temporary use permits in the very southeastern corner, and we'll talk more about those in a minute. But this is another parcel that was granted to us at the Act of Admission. And Mr. Chairman, the final parcel I'd like to highlight for you is parcel number 18. And probably the reason why most folks are in the room today, this is the Kelly parcel. It lies just on the eastern boundary of Grand Teton National Park, western boundary of the Bridger Teton National Forest, along the Grovont Road. It was also granted to the state at the Act of Admissions. Through our research, and we need to do a little bit more to understand exactly what all this means, but apparently it was conveyed back to the United States in 1900 and was later then canceled and reverted back to the state of Wyoming in 1907 via quitclaim. It's very odd to have a section 36 that would have been granted at the Act of Admissions go through that bit of gymnastics, and perhaps it was just an administrative cleanup, but it is an interesting point of history that we should dig into a little bit more. It does have one grazing lease on it, returns $1,852 currently on an annual basis, and it is the subject of a later discussion we'll have. We'll also be touring this parcel later today. Mr. Chairman, Madam Director, that was the history of state trust lands. I'm happy to answer any questions or go into any other parcels that you might want to dive into.
Madam Chair, if I might, Jason, on slide 12, you speak about a conservation easement of the Jackson Hole Land Trust. Do we know when that was put on? 1980s or something like that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, John behind me says it was the 80s. That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board before we move forward? Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit about some of the post-Teton County development study. activities. The first item is real estate transactions, and in particular, the Kelly parcel. As related to Grand Teton National Park, Deputy Crowder is going to give a little bit of the history that we have with the Kelly parcel in addition to what he has here, kind of in our dealings and considerations related to development, and then he's going to talk about some of the options that we considered. So, Deputy.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chairman, I thought it'd be a good idea to give the background of how we got to where we are with the Kelly parcel and really all the parcels that we have historically owned within Grand Teton National Park. To start off with, at the time of statehood, when Wyoming was granted school lands, we had lands within what was later to become Grand Teton National Park. In 2010, the state of Wyoming owned 4 parcels containing 1,366 surface acres and 1,405 mineral acres within the boundary of the park. Initially, that was the Antelope Flats parcel of 640 acres, the Kelly parcel of 640 acres, the Snake River parcel of 86.32 acres, and Jackson Lake, which was minerals only, of 39.59 acres. The Constitution directs the state on the Board of Land Commissioners to generate a reasonable income from these trust lands to support public schools and other beneficiaries. However, because these lands were within the exterior boundary of the park, the board was not able to realize the full potential or economic value of these lands. Prior to 2010, the board and the office and others had discussed the merits of an equal value exchange of these lands for decades. The Grand Teton National Park Exchange Act, which was Public Law 108-32, was enacted in June of 2003 under the sponsorship and active support of the late Senator Craig Thomas. The act authorizes federal acquisition of the state lands by either donation, purchase or donated or appropriated funds, or exchange of federal lands in Wyoming that are identified for disposal under the approved land use plans. A consistent effort by the board in OSLI to effectuate an exchange had been pursued since the late 1990s. In 2010, the board notified Grand Teton National Park that because it had been unable for far too long to resolve this issue in collaboration with the federal government, the board was prepared to discharge its fiduciary responsibility to manage trust lands within the park, and that the board planned to sell the 640-acre Kelly parcel at a public auction unless the Department of Interior and Congress were able to further the exchange effort in the near future. The board further specified that absent a commitment to expedite an updated appraisal and report to Congress under terms the board and then administration could agree on, the board would direct OSLI to proceed to sell 640-acre Kelly parcel at public auction in accordance with Wyoming law. After considerable efforts to resolve the matter, on December 10th, 2010, the board and the department entered into an agreement for the conveyance of interest of lands, wherein the department agreed to acquire the state trust lands that lie within the exterior boundary of the park on a parcel by parcel basis for a specified amount on or above a certain date. Specifically, the Jackson Lake parcel for $2,000 on or before January 5th of 2012, the Snake River parcel for $16 million on or before January 5th of 2013, the Antelope Flats parcel for $45 million on or before January 5th of 2014, and the Kelly parcel for $46 million on or before January 5th of 2015. The agreement was expressly conditioned upon the Wyoming legislature granting the board the authority to directly transfer the state trust land parcels to the department on the basis set forth in the agreement. The legislature granted that authority in the 2011 general session. The department acquired the Jackson Lake parcel and the Snake River parcel before the deadlines as set out before. However, in 2013, the department indicated that it was unlikely to secure funding to allow it to meet the January 5th, 2014 deadline to acquire the Antelope Flats parcel, and that it would likely work with the board to find a solution. OSLI then began discussions with the department to consider an alternative method of conveyance in the event the department was unable to meet the purchase obligation under the 2010 agreement. The department did not meet the January 5th, 2014 deadline set out in the 2010 agreement. The provisions of the agreement did not provide for automatic termination of it, and the department failed to acquire each parcel by its specified deadline. Instead, the agreement was terminable at the discretion of the board. However, both the agreement and the 2011 legislation contemplated that parties could consider alternate methods of conveyance and amended the agreement if an alternate method could be agreed upon. After receiving notice that the department would not be able to meet its purchase obligation, discussions between the department and OSLI focused on a value for value exchange for surface and or mineral interest around the state. In order to pursue an exchange, the 2010 agreement had to be amended. OSLI and the department proposed an amendment, and the board approved that amendment at its February 2014 board meeting. The amendment generally provided that the parties agree to work cooperatively to exchange the two remaining parcels of the state trust land within the park for federal land and mineral interest to be identified later. Key provisions of the amendment included a reappraisal of the Grand Teton State Trust land parcels, and if the parcels appraised for less than the amount in the 2010 agreement, the amount may be terminated by the board. It provided a deadline of January 5th, 2016 to complete the exchange, with an option to extend the deadline to December 31st, 2016 if critical administrative processes are substantially complete. Recognition that the state of Wyoming will generally not be responsible for costs, and if the exchange is not complete by the applicable deadline, the board will place the Grand Teton State Trust lands on the Category 1 disposal list, and any federal parcels found suitable for exchange will be considered for other exchanges of interest to the board. In accordance with the 2011 Wyoming legislation, which required legislative approval of alternate methods of conveyance and Public Law 108-32, the amendment was expressly conditioned on receiving approval from the Wyoming legislature and, if necessary, additional approval from Congress. The legislation regarding the exchange was introduced and passed in 2014 of the Wyoming legislature. The legislature granted the board the approval to complete the exchange with several conditions related to valuation. Additionally, the 2014 legislation created the State Land Exchange Advisory Panel consisting of 3 members. The panel was to evaluate potential land and mineral exchanges for the Grand Teton parcels and provide its evaluation and opinion to the Board of Land Commissioners before the board authorizes any exchange for the Teton parcels. Of course, Mr. Chairman, that agreement in that committee has since ceased to be effective, and at the moment, these lands, or specifically the Kelly parcel, is no longer under any agreement with the federal government or anybody else. It is considered just normal state trust land at this point and available for any disposal or management options currently within the board's rules. Now, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to provide some disposal options, as that was one of the highest provided opportunities with our Teton land commercial development study. And those include a direct sale authorization, again, as described before. We could do that through an interim topic through a legislative committee, and in that, the legislative committee would provide a bill to the legislature to consider the direct sale authorization. And as you're aware, the Constitution requires that each parcel of state trust land be sold at public auction. And the way we get around that is through legislative authorization for direct sale. We could also pursue that direct sale authorization without going through an interim committee, but having a sponsor within the legislation provide a bill for legislative consideration. And of course, the board's option that is always available is a straight public auction as required through the Constitution. If the board chose to go down that route, we would manage that transaction through our normal real estate disposal process, placing it on the Category 2 disposal list, preparing a detailed analysis that would be made available to the public. That would include the appraisal, the income generating potential, manageability, wildlife attributes, recreational attributes, etc. We would hold a public hearing here in Teton County. We would also offer the detailed analysis for public comments for 60 days, and then provide the board with an opportunity to ultimately consider the transaction to approve it or deny it. Mr. Chairman, that completes everything that I have prepared for the Kelly parcel discussion as far as the real estate transaction goes. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Jason. When was the last appraisal actually completed to finality on the Kelly parcel?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, the last appraisal was fully completed in 2010 and further amended in 2012.
sorry, Jason, what the amount was the 46 million?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, that's correct. 45 million for the Antelope Flats, 46 million for the Kelly parcel.
Okay, thanks, Jason. The next topic involves our Highway 390 or Teton Village parcels. Jason's going to discuss some of the competitive commercial permits, specifically the temporary use permits in place, and sort of our plan to get moving that parcel forward. So, Jason.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned earlier, on the Highway 390 parcel in the very southeast corner, we do have a lot of existing uses, commercial type uses in that area. They've been under temporary use permit for quite some time and have been charged a steady and stagnant rate for some time as well. We have attempted to approach market value for these permits, and of course, within Teton County, it's well known that market rates move rapidly, and so we may not have hit that at this point. We don't believe through an appraisal process that we can adequately determine what the market rate is for these permits and anticipate moving them into a competitive bidding situation to fully understand and realize what that market rate might be. There are currently 9 active temporary use permits on the parcel. They are largely for landscaping or stockpiling uses or construction type uses. There is one in the very northern part of this section that is for recreational hot air balloon rides. We have given notice to all temporary use permit holders that had an expiring temporary use permit this year that we would be renewing that or asking the board to renew those permits for 1 additional year. And at the end of that extended term, to offer these parcels or these lots for competitive bidding, regardless of the use that might come in. We provided that notice to those permit holders, as I mentioned, and we are actively working on the process in which we would offer that in the market to see what kind of response we would get. Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that not all of these existing temporary use permits expire this year. A few of them expire in later years, and we anticipate giving those guys the same consideration we're giving the expiring permits this year. So we're not just pulling the permit out from under them if they have any remaining term left. Mr. Chairman, we believe this section of the parcel has a lot of great benefit and opportunity to the board and to the beneficiaries. And we also believe that it's best to have the market tell us what that is. And so if through this competitive bidding process, stockpiles or landscape uses come back to us as the best use, then we'll pursue that avenue. However, presenting this to the market, we do believe that we'll start to learn more about what the market needs in that area and may have more sophisticated uses going into the future. But we're allowing the market, the area, the businesses, the community to drive that conversation for us. Mr. Chairman, that's everything I had on the Teton Village TUP's competitive process.
Question?
Jason, the TUPs are shaped real fun, for lack of a better term. So as those expire and potentially are reoffered, in some manner, do those boundaries stay fixed, or do you open up or how does that process work when you have these sort of little odd shapes and little fingers going in, all over the place?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, that's a great recognition, and a large portion of the defining boundaries of the existing permit areas is defined by the water in the area. There's a lot of irrigation canals that have created ponds, as you can see on the map, but really have limited where development can occur. The board is absolutely within its power to move those boundaries, and if we realize a significant opportunity comes in that would require movement of the boundaries, you're within your power to do that. However, we recognize them as being the best available full portions of the parcel. And so this is how we anticipate offering them in a competitive scenario.
So just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, they're not as random as they look. Is that an accurate statement?
Mr. Chairman, that's
A couple quick questions. Do you have an overlay, or is there any concern about land use planning that would maybe affect any of these parcels?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question as well. We have been in contact with the Teton County Planning and Zoning Office and would continue to do so as we move forward with any advancing opportunities. Everything within this map that you see here, what we currently do, is agreeable to them, I guess. It's also important to mention that state trust land is not subject to planning and zoning laws within the county. It is subject to building codes, but not planning and zoning laws. So we try to work with the county and understand the needs and the advancements moving forward as they see it. But we also look at it from a fiduciary perspective as well, what may be best for the beneficiaries.
So a related question, two parts then. Are there utility easements on any of these parcels?
Mr. Chairman, there is power on the other side of the road. We do have power on our side of the road. I don't know if it goes directly through these parcels or not, but within the Highway 390 parcel, there are some utility corridors as well.
I see. And then lastly, are we aware of any easements that might surround the parcels, any of these parcels?
Mr. Chairman, we haven't gone in depth to understand what all of those look like. We do understand there may be some conservation easements on the east side of the highway, yes, that surround our parcel. To some extent, there's also some residential development as well.
Thank you.
Deputy, if you could tell us, you mentioned there's one conservation easement here on, looks like that's on page 12. And we've had previous discussions on the possibilities of conservation easements and ways we could use those to also maximize value. What considerations are there in relation to conservation easements as far as the longevity of use for a certain parcel? So the question is does that tie up things for a long time? What's the typical term of those types of easements? And how are they structured such that what we get as a return on a conservation easement maintains some semblance of relativity to market pricing, whether it be 10, 15, or 20 years down the road?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, another great question. We, as an office, have been hesitant to recommend to the board pursuance of another conservation easement across the state, simply because the nature of them, the term of them is perpetual. It's forever, basically. And we wouldn't want to bind the hands of future boards in its fiduciary responsibility for revenue generation just to accept a one-time upfront payment. It's also important to note that that upfront one-time payment is based on appraisal, so current market conditions at the time of placing the easement on the parcel. The trust has been in place for 130 years, and we expect it to go another 130 years, and really don't want to bind the board in any of its development opportunities going forward. So we have been approached a few times to place conservation on this parcel and others around the state, and just frankly been hesitant to provide that to the board as a positive recommendation from the office.
So, the deputy, just for clarification, I think you said we've been reluctant to recommend easements being placed on this parcel and other parcels. But I thought from the initial conversation, there was an easement already in place on this one.
Mr. Chairman, we're currently talking about the Highway 390 parcel just south of Teton Village. The parcel that has the easement with the Jackson Hole Land Trust is further north up the Snake River, not a part of this
Okay,
one.
thank you. One last question too. If I go back to the late 70s, 80s, there were livestock grazing in Grand Teton National Park, and that eventually changed. Has that changed the use on these parcels?
Mr. Chairman, it hasn't changed the use on this parcel specifically, the Highway 390 or Kelly. It has changed how we've managed the grazing use on them. The office has historically recognized that there's a lot of opportunities available for both of these parcels. And it tried to position itself in a way to be nimble, to be able to remove that use, whatever it might be, grazing or what have you, so that it could be responsive to any of those opportunities that would come up. We've reduced some of the grazing uses down to temporary use permits, reduced the number of years from 10 years to 5 years to 2 years, just really based on the opportunity that the office and the board saw out in front of it so that it could maintain that nimbleness. But it's always maintained the use of grazing within the state trust parcels.
Mr. Chairman, I would just note that the superintendent is on the Zoom, and we've asked her if she has any questions just to unmute and chime in. So while it may seem a little awkward, I think that's probably the easiest way to handle that. She's nodding, so that's good. Thank you. The next topic for discussion are development RFPs, some of the things that we did see come out of the study. And so Jason, I'll turn it back to you for further discussion on some of those.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chairman, this will probably be pretty quick. When we presented to you the study on commercial development of the lands within Teton County, we expressed to you what we thought the next steps would be were to present the RFPs based on the amount and the type of opportunities given to us through that study, and to focus on a couple parcels just to maintain movement forward and not get bogged down in the enormity of all the parcels that we could look at. Specifically, we're concentrating on what we call the Munger Mountain parcel, the one on the very southern end of the county. We anticipate and have a few drafts of the RFP prepared, going through the Department of Administration and Information's RFP process for them to manage that for us. We anticipate being able to provide that to the public for a response sometime within the next month to 2 months, and hopefully have a use identified for your consideration at the beginning of next year. Frankly, we've been a little bit slow, and it's internal staffing and other requirements of the office in order for us to get these pushed out. But that is our anticipation, is to start with the Munger Mountain parcel, provide that RFP relatively quickly for the public for response.
Jason, is the Munger Mountain the planting one? The planting proposal?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Director, yes, within the study, glamping was one of the identified opportunities that came through.
There are no further questions on Munger Mountain. We'll proceed into the conservation leasing topic. And I believe Wyoming Outdoor Council prepared the information that's in your packets. They've done a lot of the preliminary work on this particular topic, and I believe the information in your packet has sort of a synthesis of what some other states are doing with respect to recognition of conservation leasing. And this is kind of an exciting thought or opportunity. We've talked about it internally at OSLI that there should be a way to monetize conservation and conserving, scenic and wildlife and other values and ways to do that. So Jason, I'll turn it back over to you to kind of provide a little overview of some of the information.
Thank you, Ben. Mr. Chairman, this is a new and interesting idea for the board to consider. It's not anything it's done in the past. However, our existing uses of state trust land here recently, within the last 5 years or so, has increasingly run into conflict. I use the word conflict very lovingly with conservation efforts or habitat protection efforts. Obviously, the board's fiduciary responsibility requires it to attempt to optimize the asset as much as possible through its performance. This is one way the conservation groups have approached us to identify a way forward in those discussions. We see many different opportunities to pursue this type of a lease across the state. It's a great way to monetize conservation for a defined period of time. Would also possibly allow habitat-based science to catch up with development efforts, to guide development efforts in important areas. It would also provide for broad conversation when pursuing development opportunities and allow the conservation community to be a part of those conversations and be at the table because they would have a lease on the property. There's different options to consider separate. This is a different option to consider separate from the conservation easement discussion that we previously had. We see uses of this type of lease in many different forms. Obviously, here in Teton County, it would be for the protection of the viewshed and the available habitat on these parcels. Across the state, we see the utility through ungulate migration corridors and obviously protect sensitive habitat management on a landscape level across ownership boundaries, and possibly many others that we haven't fully discussed yet. As the director mentioned, the Wyoming Outdoor Council has done a great job of kind of laying a foundational stepping stone for us to jump off of and pursue conservation leasing through whatever means or terms. We're currently working with them and other conservation-minded groups to identify what those terms might look like, identify parcels that would be of most importance to them, identify specific funding streams, and really to also determine what a suitable, responsible party may be, who would actually hold the lease that would give the board some comfort that the intent of the lease would be, preserved through the term of the lease. Obviously, this is a new and separate thing, separate from a conservation easement, and we expect it to be termed, not in perpetuity, but to have some term date that would require reconsideration and renewal of some sort. So, Mr. Chairman, this is a new and fledgling idea, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Debbie, I'm familiar with some of these, and the one that I'm sort of interested in your point of view on is, if I remember correctly, Colorado has some sort of a special long-term lease arrangement for agricultural producers with conservation at its base. Are you familiar with that program?
Mr. Chairman, what I'm familiar with the state of Colorado is what they were successful in amending their constitution and adding conservation to the benefits to the beneficiaries from state trust land. So they were able to manipulate some grazing leases and other types of leases to conform to that constitutional amendment.
So if I'm remembering correctly, a person that I knew was helping to advise a young starting family on how to put together a agricultural practice on state leases. They actually went in competition with Nature Conservancy, if I remember correctly. They were able to acquire it. The conservation good was put forward, the family got on the land. They're still running it, but it was an open bidding process for that. And part of it was the remuneration that they would get, but part of it was also the conservation good. And if I remember correctly, there were pieces that were about viewshed, pieces about watershed, pieces, about erosion as well. And I'm just curious if there are other states that maybe we have that opportunity in discussing that with any open public discussion. But I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a lot of experience with that. I think that if we were able to combine a conservation lease with existing uses out there, that is somewhat of the intent, is to not just place a conservation lease on a whole parcel and that kicks everything else off, but to do something that you can have some symbiotic relationship there to provide a greater benefit.
Jason, under the conservation leases, it says that they're currently administered through special use leases and new category of leases could be established legislatively. So help me understand, is that something we could move forward without legislation, or we would need legislation?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, this white paper is from the Wyoming Outdoor Council's perspective, so we haven't really gone back and verified and provided consistency, I guess, for those types of things. But yes, you currently have authorization through your special uses program to do these types of leases. The board has the authority to manipulate and change its rules as well as its lease terms without the need of legislative approval.
Thank you.
And exactly, just sort of following up on that, and I don't know, maybe the treasurer has some points of view on this. But it is interesting to me because I think one of the considerations that traditionally has been taken into account, and I look at this and I compare it to what happened in Hawaii where things were just opened up. There has always been a kind of respect for the integrity of operations that have traditionally used a particular piece of ground. I don't know, Mr. Treasurer, I know you and the secretary both served in the legislature and I think have probably dealt with those issues.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as we were talking about this, I think there's some opportunities to possibly the partnership with the operators in the EQIP program that the federal government has that looks into providing, I guess, some different requirements as far as moving conservation along, as far as erosion and water conservation and a lot of other different areas that and I think the state could I think help facilitate that and actually increase the productive value of the state lands and work through that area. I think that's a possibility. And we could do special use leases in different areas. And I think I prefer going through a process that was rules and regulations and policy rather than changing the Constitution. A couple of reasons: timeliness for one, in implementation, and unintended consequences when we actually go into the Constitution and make changes. So this could be a test ground necessarily to look at some different areas where we could move the needle and protect our resources here, and for this generation and next generation.
And Mr. Chairman, just following up on that and your comment about respect for traditional uses, I know that in other states it kind of started going in this direction, and the nice thing I think about it is that the board and its ability to change its rules there's a way to structure these things where we maintain our trust obligations. We maintain a vision of multiple use in traditional operations and ensuring that agriculture still plays a prominent role. And then the exciting piece, of course, can be the conservation piece that unlike easements, has so much flexibility that I think we have the flexibility to make this perhaps look the way we want it to look and accomplish a lot of the goals that a lot of folks have for state trust land. So I think it's a very interesting opportunity for us.
And Jason, one last question too, and I forgot to ask that. It strikes me, if I remember correctly, that there is a sagebrush core area that it may be adjacent to one of these parcels. I'm thinking of the one that is, and there may be others, but I'm thinking of the one that's the on page 7. If I remember correctly, the ridge just east of the highway going out of town, I think was a core area.
Mr. Chairman, we haven't overlaid the core area maps on these parcels, so I couldn't tell exactly where they are, but there are a few in Teton County that state trust land on the part of.
Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes some of the prepared remarks that we had. Jason, was there anything further you wanted to mention, or should we move into public comment now? Okay. With that, we will move into the public comment phase. I'm sure there are some people here in the audience that might like to make some comments about the information they heard today or otherwise, and there might be some on Zoom as well. So, Sean, do you want to carry the microphone? Thanks.
Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, good morning. My name is Mark Sullivan. I'm a local resident, have been for many years. I'm also a Wyoming attorney. I'm also here with some of my neighbors from Butler Creek, which is down Fall Creek Road near the Munger Mountain parcel, and that's the parcel that I'd like to briefly address with you. We've submitted comments on the RFP you guys put out on behalf of our HOA, expressing some concerns about the under canvas glamping proposal, which is in essence a very large hotel operation, really, without the physical improvements, but all of the visitor services requirements and impacts from travel and visitation that would be visited upon our corner of the valley. I have, because I'm a lawyer, I travel all over the state and visit various courts in various counties around the state. When I do, one of the things I hear from court reporters and judges and legal secretaries and people around the state is, my God, how can you stand living in Teton County with all of your traffic and overwhelming pressures? I get this everywhere I go. And one reason that I love living here is because our corner of the valley is particularly special. And I would really, really encourage this board to come on down and pay a visit. It's quiet down there, and that's because it's a fairly out of the way corner of the valley down in the southwest corner, and there's only one road in and out, and there are no commercial uses to speak of, or at least not many down there, except for some agricultural uses and some very low impact commercial uses. And this would dramatically change if the under canvas proposal were advanced. It would dramatically change that corner of the valley, which is home to all manner of wildlife, as you can imagine. And the Munger Mountain parcel in particular is extraordinary. My neighbors and I use it for access to the adjacent federal lands. There's a trail that runs through there, we mountain bike and hike and ride horses on. It's remarkable. And this proposal is incredibly intense in my impression in terms of the number of people that it would bring to our corner of the valley, the pressures it would put on Fall Creek Road, which is a 2-lane country road. So we're very, very concerned about it. And it represents a kind of a new front in the development of Teton County. If this corner of the valley were to begin to be opened up in this manner. So it's deeply concerning to all of us. That's why so many of my neighbors and friends are here. And I know that you may have been expecting a lot of public comment about the Kelly parcel, and you'll probably be hearing that this morning, but please don't forget about our corner of the valley. Our conservation responsibilities should be co-equal with your fiduciary goals and duties to the students of the state of Wyoming and to the trust. And I appreciate those responsibilities that you hold. And I very much appreciate you considering the conservation leasing option or conservation easement options that are before you or may come before you to help preserve this parcel, because it really is a very sensitive part of this extraordinary valley. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. I want to recognize Senator Guru and Representative Schwartz. Senator Guru, are there comments that you would like to make?
Yeah.
We'll get a microphone over to you.
Thank you. I'm gonna step over here.
Good morning, members of the board. Thanks for being here, and welcome to Grand Teton National Park, or as I like to call it, Senate District 17. I know that other name's a little more popular, but I kind of like the other one too. When this bill came up to study these lands in Teton County, I have to say at first I was not enthused, only because I didn't quite understand why Teton County was being singled out. We have $4 billion according to the handout of state lands across the state of Wyoming, and I think that we need to look at all of them globally and how we do it, how we dispose or how we use these lands to reach the stated goal of helping the school children of the state, which is the constitutional goal for these lands, and how we do that. I have been though heartened by the conversation today and some of the things that we've been talking about, you all have been talking about, as far as kind of thinking outside the box about how we can use those properties and how best to do it. But since we're here, I'd be amiss if I didn't talk about some of the parcels that Jason brought up. Each county in the state looks at itself as a unique place, and our county is no different. And so I think that the difference here is that some of the values of the properties in question are a higher value. But nonetheless, I think that while you deliberate the disposition of these properties and what to do with them, I hope you'll keep in mind that the values of this community and the values of this area are probably not much different than the other 22 counties in the state. That they all are unique. They all, as you just heard the previous speaker say, talk about his corner of a state land parcel and the adjoining land. I think all of us in this room share that same opinion about all of these parcels, which is the same as what you hear in the other 22 counties in the state. Whether it be agricultural interests, whether it be ranching interests, whether it be conservation interests, whatever. I think those things need to be at the front of your mind as you take a look at these parcels today. And we'll get a chance to talk about each one and each of their individual just differences and just the different facets of them. One, of course, being in a national park or right next to a national park, and the values to the people of the country with regard to that parcel. But also the 390 parcel, we talk about that. That has a great deal of interest to me as a former county commissioner who worked with land use regulations, not as long as my fellow member here, my House member, who will talk a little more about that stuff. But keep in mind those values of our community. That's why we wrote and amended in the legislation to consult with the county commissioners, the national park, and all the affected entities that these lands surround. So welcome, and we're glad you're here, and we look forward to the discussion. And thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you, Senator and Representative Schwartz, and I have also Representative Roscoe here. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Senator Galoo has stolen many of my thoughts. But first, I would like to echo his comments. Thank you so much for coming, because it means a lot to us to know that you're taking the time to actually see these lands and understand how we feel. I'm not only going to talk about the Kelly parcel for now. As some of you probably know, I sponsored House Bill 164 in the last session, which would have authorized the sale to the federal government. It failed in a rather traumatic fashion, but it did stimulate a very interesting conversation. And I'm just going to mention some of the points I made on the floor. When you look at Grand Teton National Park out here, you have to recognize that this was private land, and that there was the forethought that by making it a park, it had a greater value. And I think we can see that greater value just by the traffic today. And actually, that value has also been a component in the very high land prices we now have in Teton County. So when you look at the Kelly parcel, I am convinced the highest and best use for that parcel is to sell it to the federal government so that we can maintain public access on that parcel. We can maintain migration corridors, hunting opportunities, recreational opportunities, viewshed opportunities. I'm keenly aware of the issues of K-12 funding. I served on the recalibration committee. I've been involved in the debates on the floor. The fiduciary responsibility should not just be considered as a financial mechanism to provide dollars for K-12. I firmly believe that we also have a responsibility to show future generations of K-12 students that we recognize there are other values that trump, sorry to use that word, the financial benefits that could occur from selling and developing this property. And I think that's very important for you all to remember. And when we make the tour here in a couple hours, I would be happy to talk about that more. So thank you all, and I will cut off my comments now so the rest of the public can get their time.
Thank you, Representative, and let me say it's my hope that we can make this as comfortable and casual as possible, but I wanted to recognize Representative Roscoe. And now I'll kind of go through, I think there are some county commissioners here, and I think at least one member of the school board. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board, and I appreciate the difficulty of the work you have to do. It's staggering, really. And thanks for coming. I would just like to urge a few things that you, in making these decisions, that you certainly address all the local agencies, our county commissioners, our building department and planning department, but also YDOT is really involved in a lot of these parcels, and certainly the game fish. I'm sure you will do that. Thank you. Other people, I think, will speak a lot better than I can. But I would like to go back to what the superintendent mentioned about the history of how this park was put together, which is a national gem, and put together to conserve this park. And I think that history means a lot, and I think maybe today we're part of that history. I think looking down the road a long way, that we should just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. One of the great joys of serving on this board is that you get to look at the Tetons and we get to look at you. Do I have a member of the commission? A couple of members of the commission.
Good morning.
Hi, Natalie.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for coming out. Again, I will echo what our representative and senator said about coming here and allowing our community to make comment on opportunities and possible challenges. On behalf of the commission, just want to reiterate a few things from the letter that we provided last fall, and then my colleague Commissioner Newcomb also has some comments. The board certainly supports the proposal from Grand Teton National Park for the perpetual preservation of the Kelly parcel. I think our concerns as a commission are really focused on the impacts that any potential permanent development on the other parcels would have on public infrastructure. So we would ask that you keep in mind how proposed uses would be supported by public infrastructure, such as transportation networks, water and sewer, emergency services, and workforce housing.
If I might, just quickly, and thank you, you are the chair, aren't you?
Correct.
Thank Madam Chair. Any thoughts on the Munger Mountain parcel as well?
The commission's comments related to, I think, the glamping proposal there are focused primarily around adequate access, and I think you will get to experience that today during your tour. Water treatment and accommodating an increased human presence when it comes to wastewater and how human waste is managed. Emergency services, being able to access an area that would have increased human use and what that would mean for wildfire, for fire EMS, and how we get there. And then finally, that increased human presence leading to increased wildlife-human conflicts and what that would mean for wildlife management.
Thank you. And then Madam Chair, the other one, and I don't know if there's a specific name for it, but I know you know what it is. It's the one that's sort of north of town that runs along the base there, and there's some subsidence below it once before. Any particular, I think there is a utility that runs across that now.
You're speaking about the parcel that's adjacent to the town of Jackson?
Yeah.
Not as many concerns there, just pointing out as you did the slopes and what development around slopes can mean. In terms of how we look at development overall in Teton County and what our comprehensive plan directs us to do is to focus development closer to town. Town is heart, that's where services are. And so opportunities there may be of greater interest and have fewer infrastructure impacts than some of the more remote access areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Commissioner Newcomb. In all those photos with the president and the number 2s and number 3s and number 4s are standing behind, just very stern looking. They always have these very stern looks. That's what I was doing behind my mask. I was number 2 here, standing behind the chair, looking very stern and serious because her comments were right on. I just want to really say thank you very, very much, truly, for coming up here, for taking the time. And we were in the thick of smoke so thickly that you could barely see the trees out there just a few days ago. So fortune smiled on us today, and you're going to get the full effect of what it means to be on those parcels. The chair really nailed it, wildland, urban interface, fire hazards, wildlife, conflicts, additional traffic, the impacts of most forms of development in this county, if it's not core workforce housing, are substantial. We're just not like the rest of the state. We don't have very much space. And I don't know today if you'll get caught up on the traffic on 22, but we're probably pushing 30,000 vehicles a day on that road. 10 to 15,000 of those vehicles are the workers coming over to service the big commercial uses, the big houses. And that's the kind of impacts that we could see with certain types of uses on these properties. So I'll leave it at that. And we really want to work with you, work with a lot of the folks in this room as much as possible to work towards relatively low impact uses, relatively conservation uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Newcomb. Bill, do you want to? Sure. Trustee Scarlett.
Yeah. Good morning, and like everyone else, welcome to Jackson. It's good to see you all. A lot of the school board, I'm Bill Scarlett, Vice Chairman of Teton County School District #1. And I think the school board and I really agree with what Senator Grew and Representative Schwartz has said. These are gem properties, these are magical properties. And we really need to work at balancing a solution in order to fulfill your unenviable position of how to best fund public education for not just the kids here in our county, but the kids across the state. So we all have an equitable education. And so as we go through this process, I look forward to engaging with just not only members of our community and the state, but also national and international, because this is more than just a state asset. This is an international gem, and we need to work hard to do the right things so everybody involved is successful. So thank you.
Thank you, trustee Scarlett. Is there anyone else from elected office that I might have missed? If not, let's open it for general public comment. I think I have three people over here. And when you stand up, if you could identify yourself, and then we'll open it for questions.
Hello, my name's Cam Eddy. I'm just a local constituent here, and I'm concerned about these parcels very much, only in the genuine comparison between them and the rest of the state and the rest of the world. They are international properties and gems, and in true responsibility to the education of the children of Wyoming, I want the board and all involved to consider what the value of these properties could be in, say, 500 years or 1,000 years. Not rush to next generation or in 50 years, but in 500 years. Consider that as you drive back on the I-80 corridor and other places that don't have the value that these places have now. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again, as many have said, for your attendance here and coming to see actually the state lands that you're stewarding on behalf of Wyoming's children. We understand that that's a big role, and you're in a particular unenviable position. My name is Jared Smith. My family's owned land at the end of Fish Creek Road, north of Wilson, just south of Teton Village since 1946. We abut some of the state lands that aren't really being talked much about, which are upslope to the immediate west. There's a series of parcels. These are parcels that our family used to lease actually from the state. And the reason for that was because we have a spring on one of the parcels, and that's a file from the state issued water rights. But our family is always concerned about what might happen to that land. It's unbuildable. It's a very steep slope, but we wanted to always just maintain the conservation and wildlife habitat. We let that lease, and our neighbors also let that lease lapse some years ago. And as we've been talking, and as these discussions have been taking place, I just want to let you know that we're very interested in releasing those parcels. And I think we could get our neighborhood to band together. They are unbuildable, they're unusable, but we understand the important role that the state lands have in terms of generating revenue for the children of Wyoming. So we'd like to engage in that discussion and consider leasing those lands, even though they really have no value. That's immediately to the west of us. There's about, I think, 3 or 4 parcels that have been part of some of the discussion, and I think even the land trust maybe submitted an interest on that. We'd like to partner with the land trust, and I think the neighborhood would be willing to step up to the plate and make it worthwhile discussion. Immediately to the east of us, we have share a fence line with the Snake River Ranch. They have stewarded this land for many, many decades and have kept it in agricultural use. The other thing that land has abundant value for is wildlife migration. Just in the last couple of years, we worked with the Snake River Ranch to make the barbed wire fence that has been there historically wildlife friendly. So during the summer months when they're grazing cattle and horses, the cattle and horses hopefully don't get onto the land to the east. But during the fall, what we do is they've installed with the Wildlife Foundation a letdown fence. So we actually let down the barbed wire, and then the elk, deer, moose are free to migrate back and forth. This morning, our family woke up to a baby moose and a cow moose that typically are either down in the willows, right abutting state land down below the school section, or they're up at our spring line immediately up, just to underscore the significance of that migration. It happens on a daily basis, and we're all the beneficiaries of that very, very important use. So we believe our neighborhood, and in conversations with the Snake River Ranch and with the Land Trust, that there is a win-win solution right at our fingertips. And that's what we'd like to discuss more. And we're very happy and pleased that you're willing to engage in that discussion. We understand the need for you to generate revenue off that land, but we also understand that it has significant agricultural value. And I would say our neighborhood also believes it has huge wildlife habitat value. There's elk out on the land. There's actually a resident elk herd right now. You may see that herd today. Moose, deer. It's the headwaters of Fish Creek. That's where the springs bubble up and create Fish Creek and continue south. So we would like to see a partnership. We understand the need to generate probably more income than maybe you're generating now. We believe that there's enough interest in the valley that we could step up to the plate as a community and as a neighborhood to participate in that. And we would really like to see that partnership get discussed, where whether it's a land swap or actual generation through a conservation lease, we believe there's a win-win to be had. So thank you for your time. Thank you especially for coming up today.
Thank you for your comments. I think there's one over a couple of places.
Hello, thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate the opportunity to comment on the process as this process moves forward in Teton County. My name is Kathy Nyroth, and I'm a Wilson resident, also on Upper Fish Creek Road, which is adjacent to the 390 parcel. I am very sympathetic to Wyoming's need for more revenue for our public schools. And like the others have expressed, I am very empathetic with the task that you all have in front of you. And I appreciate your willingness to do the hard work that comes with finding new sources of revenues for the state of Wyoming, and particularly for our school districts. However, having said that, I think it's really imperative that we look at this in a broader context for the whole state of Wyoming, because the tourism industry and the hotel industry and general tax revenues for the state of Wyoming that come from Teton County support the whole state of Wyoming. And the lands that are here that are under trust, I realize, are slightly different. But it is this beautiful open space that we have here in Teton County, and wildlife corridors that have been mentioned. They are truly natural resources also, perhaps differently defined than how natural resources are thought of today when leasing state land. But these open spaces do generate broad revenues for the whole state of Wyoming. And maybe there's a way we can look at how to redirect some of those revenues to support the school districts, in addition to what your task is as the state land board commissioners. I think that more specific to just the school section here, I would say that a comprehensive evaluation process is really imperative for the reasons that the county commissioners have mentioned regarding the infrastructure impacts in the state or in our county, transportation, sewage, water rights, even the several Wyoming departments the agricultural department and the water quality department commented when the original proposals were submitted in October last year on their concerns for developing these parcels in Teton County. And I think we need to make sure that we keep all of those comments in perspective when we move forward. I think that we can find additional revenues for Wyoming schools, whether it's land swaps or conservation leasing, which I find to be a very intriguing idea today, or other mechanisms. I am certain that we can figure out a way to do this without destroying the natural beauty and the scarce open space resources that we have in Teton County. So again, thank you very much for coming today and for hosting this meeting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. In the back, I have a person who is. His hand up. Mr. Chair, other members of the board, thank you for coming up here. My name is Max Ludington. I'm the president of the Jackson Hole Land Trust. Just echo many of the comments so far that we do very much appreciate all of you taking the time to drive across the state and come up here and see these lands. It's very important to all of us. The Jackson Hole Land Trust has over 57,000 acres under easement across 5 counties in northwest Wyoming. As Deputy Crowder pointed out, one of those easements is with the state of Wyoming, and you guys have been an excellent partner in conservation. I would also like to recognize that as we're discussing the values of conservation of these lands today, the state has successfully stewarded these lands. The lessees have stewarded these lands. The reason they have maintained conservation value is many of the actions that the state has taken and that the lessees, particularly the ranching families in this community, have taken to continue to steward those lands moving forward. Building on that point, as others have mentioned, there are many conservation values present in the state trust lands present today. We see preservation of multi-generational ranches. Some of these lands are essential leasing components of those multi-generational ranches, which bring not only cultural and economic values, but also are compatible with many of the conservation values we've discussed. Incredible wildlife habitat across these incredible scenic corridors that really have defined and in many ways driven and built the economy locally, which has also benefited much of the state. I want to point out that the Jackson Hole Land Trust is a willing partner. We are an action-oriented partner in devising solutions. Conservation easements are a tool that we have. It is a very powerful tool, an effective tool, and it has done quite a bit of work in this community. But we are an action-oriented partner. We can be creative in thinking about different approaches to conservation and preserving the conservation values of these state lands. We are flexible. We are willing to think through new and creative ways to address not only the obligations of the state trust beneficiaries, but also the conservation values that we see on many of these properties. I did want to clarify one point. Deputy Crowder was correct earlier in stating that the easements that we hold are in perpetuity. That is, we do have the ability to hold term easements. That is a tool that we could potentially pursue as a land trust. Previously, there's been some reluctance to do so because there have not been funding sources. That at a federal level, some of the funding programs have opened up potentially new sources of funding for term easements. There was also one other point I wanted to follow up on too. There was a question about whether the 390 parcel is adjacent to any other conservation or to any other easements, and it is part of a very impressive corridor that you will note today on your tour of that property. As you drive north on 390, headed towards Grand Teton National Park, you'll notice you'll cross a bridge, and all of a sudden, the views of the park are going to open up to you. Essentially, that entire corridor north there up to the Grand Teton National Park interest is almost entirely protected under conservation easement, with a couple of exceptions. This state trust land being one of those exceptions. But you'll notice that really is the corridor that defines a lot of people's entrance into Grand Teton National Park, and that is part of a mosaic of properties that we've worked to protect. Many of the other state trust lands, and even some of the ones that were not discussed today, are part of an important mosaic of conservation that has brought economic value, that has defined the character and defined this community in many ways. We appreciate your partnership and working towards solutions to continue to maintain those while meeting your obligations to state trust beneficiaries.
Thank you for your comments. One quick question for you, for the land trust. You've been established in Jackson for a very long time. And conservation easements have evolved over time as well. Have you worked with forests, any of the, I think we've got a forest plan revision in place now that we're working on. Are you also engaged in that when you talk about easements, corridors, things like that, to make sure that we are synced up?
We do work in partnership with many of the federal land partners. We've worked on exchanges, facilitating exchanges to federal partners with the U.S. Forest Service in particular. Just this last year, we've down in Sblc County, we facilitated an exchange on a parcel. We've done a pretty prominent parcel, Poison Creek Trailhead, which is a popular trailhead in the southern part of this county. We've worked on before. So yes, we have worked in the past. We've been in close contact with the national parks, with Chip Jenkins, the superintendent here as well. And so we do work well in partnership with the federal agencies on a lot of these issues.
So, and just to follow up a little bit on that, one of the things that some of our neighboring states, Colorado in particular, are beginning to understand is that recreation is putting a big bind on migration corridors, and we're starting to love places to have, in some cases. Wyoming, we really hate to have that sort of notion about permits. Are you looking at ways that we can manage that kind of recreational access? We don't want to deny anybody, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we have something for people to enjoy.
Any conservation easement that we take first considers the desires of the landowner and the private property owner in the interest of the private property rights associated with the land. Second to that, and compatible with that, we consider the conservation values that would be upheld by the easement. So any easement is written to uphold those conservation values. We do work on opening up public access, and that is always considered in terms of a balance. And so we would not look at opening up access where it might preclude a migration corridor, might cut short a migration corridor and have deleterious conservation impacts. So that it's always a balance that we consider. As I said, also keeping in mind the interests of the private property owner.
Thank you. I think over on the left-hand side of the room, we have 3 comments lined up. Okay, and then after those 3 comments, we might just take a brief break and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thanks for being here. My name is Lisa McGee. I'm the director of the Wyoming Outdoor Council. We are a statewide organization and certainly have a lot of members in Teton County, and I appreciate the discussion this morning. It's really appropriate that we're focusing on these parcels in Teton County. I would ask too, to just, as you're traveling around today and thinking about some of these concepts that are new for us as a state, like conservation leasing, that we look at the broader package of state trust lands. The parcels here are unique, but like others have said, they share some commonality with other parcels in the state that aren't also producing the revenue that they could. And so it was really our pleasure to produce the white paper that you have in your packet, looking at what other states are starting to do. There's some emerging strategies that I think Wyoming can consider that are really exciting. Our recommendation would be perhaps to start with some lower conflict parcels in other parts of the state with high wildlife values and low oil and gas potential, for example. Parcels that almost lie almost entirely within a migration corridor, or which are bordered on 3 sides by a wilderness study area. Those parcels have perhaps been bid on in the past, but not surprisingly, not developed. And so having conservation interests at the table, I think can actually, like some others have said, be a win-win in that we can monetize some of these values that we all believe are important. And perhaps, a pilot study in another part of the state could then allow us the confidence and have some experience under our belts when we move to some other parcels that might be a little bit more complicated. I really appreciate everybody's time. We are really thrilled to be at the table with all of you, state, federal, and non-profit partners, and we hope the discussion continues. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Melissa Turley, the Executive Director of the Teton Village Association. And I'd just like to briefly reiterate some of the points that we expressed in a letter we sent to you in October of last year to let you know that we do take a keen interest in the scale of development and the impacts that might be created by any change in use on the state trust land off of Highway 390 south of Teton Village. We at Teton Village Association have been deeply invested in mitigating traffic impacts on Highway 390 for more than 2 decades now. And we also were very involved with many other partners who are represented here today in the work that took place just in the last 5 years to bury the power lines that also help to protect that important view corridor that you will witness today as you travel north from Lake Creek up towards Grand Teton National Park. So we feel very well represented by our local county commission and the comments of our statewide electeds here today. And again, like so many have said, we really appreciate you taking the time to come to hear from us and to see these plans yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more comment and then we'll have a brief break and come back. Get some more. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and other board members. My name is Tom Segerstrom. I'm the Executive Director for the Teton Conservation District, locally elected representatives of the community that are dedicated to conservation of natural resources under the Department of Agriculture. And the character of this community mandates that we are involved in the conservation of many other resources. There are a couple of things, and that's represented by an 83% voter approved voluntary conservation tax here in Jackson. We know that our local economy and the health of our economy here depends upon these aesthetic and natural resources in addition to agriculture. But I would like to clarify a few things that may have missed your attention. The purchased conservation easements that you do hold with the Jackson Hole Land Trust was paid for by many millions of dollars. And I don't know how that money is used, but invested over time, it certainly continues to produce funds for the children of the state. So conservation leases and conservation easements do play a role over time. In addition, they do not preclude traditional uses such as agriculture on those on that state parcel. And I think that is covers the main points that the Conservation District board members would like to make. We are happy to serve as a resource, a local resource for board at any time. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your comments. Very good color on that easement. Let's I'm going to give us probably, should we come back about 5 minutes of 11? And my reason for that is that this allows maybe people to have a bit of conversation. So, does that make sense to you, Director? Make sense to everyone out there? Thank you very much. Supposed to be one thing about this a little bit too. yourselves today. It is, this is going to be great. And the testimony is very worthwhile, as is the conversation that you have outside of that. Let's see if we can start taking some comments again. There's anyone couple here, there's been. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for being here. My name is Turner Rezor, and I am a fourth generation member of the Snake River Ranch family, which leases two of the school sections that you guys are looking at today, the 390 section up north and the Munger Mountain parcel down Fall Creek Road. Well, first of all, we'd like to say that we greatly appreciate the State Land Board's stewardship of the state-owned land in Teton County and around the state. By managing them predominantly for agriculture, the Land Board has very significantly contributed to the tourism economy of Teton County and its agricultural, scenic, and wildlife fabric, which produces strong and enduring economic value for the county and the state. As tourism becomes an increasingly important economic driver for the state, the attributes of these lands play an increasingly important role in supporting our state's future. So my family's been leasing these properties since 1940, and they played a really important role in our being able to continue operating agriculturally in the valley since 1929. For us, not only are they important operationally, but they're important for a lot of the other reasons that people have laid out here today. Their preservation of scenic space, wildlife values, the impact they have on people visiting the valley who get to see these lands and that are left with an impression that they get to take home with them and remember forever. And they are remarkable properties. And it's been our family's ethic over the years to work to protect and conserve the lands that we've owned that surround both of these state land parcels. As Max Ludington was saying earlier, the northern parcel, beginning at the southern boundary of our upper ranch by Teton Village at Lake Creek for just over 3 miles, the land on either side of Highway 390 is under conservation easement with the exception of that school land parcel. So you almost have I think it's like 3.4 mile stretch of scenic corridor creating what I think is maybe one of the most unique approaches to a national park that's privately owned and a most unique approach to a ski area, which I think the ski area appreciates and with great partnership with them. Anyway, so we're very interested in learning more about this process as it goes forward. We really appreciate hearing comments about thinking creatively and outside of the box and coming up with win-win solutions, which we believe there are. And but we're here to be a resource. We're here to help cooperatively. And again, to say thank you for letting us make use of these lands for the last almost 100 years. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeser. I had a quick question, or 2 quick questions, if I might. One is, one of the issues that has come up from time to time with state parcels has been, what do we do about housing for teachers and others? Just recognizing the cost of housing is quite high. And so I think that some of these parcels, perhaps 390, have come into that discussion. So that was question number 1. And then number 2, it's just your view on the Munger Mountain piece as well.
With the first question, this is, we're a big family now, so we need to kind of cultivate these answers collectively. So just consider this to be my own response. But as you're probably well aware, the Teton County planning has worked hard to create these sort of development nodes with rural lands in between. So in a lot of ways, developing affordable housing right there on that 390 section might not be appropriate, though the family has very preliminarily talked, these very indoor conversations about other ways that affordable housing could be increased as part of as part of whatever the next steps are for that parcel. And as far as the Munger Mountain parcel goes, we have, I think that's again something that the family needs to talk about. But it seems in a lot of ways that the Under Canvas group is very environmentally motivated. There are traffic considerations. It seems like a complicated thing to consider. We'd be interested in doing possibly a boundary adjustment so that our agricultural lands are not disconnected, as currently that state parcel cuts between two parts of the property. And I think it's a boundary adjustment that would work well both for the state and for the ranch. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Chairman, members of the board, I am the Government Affairs Director for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I wanted to put our support sort of behind this creative approach to conservation leasing. But also, as the lobbyist that spends a lot of time down there, also put some support behind using special use leases. I would really love to not work on a constitutional amendment. But we really love how creative this is, and the way that we sort of see this working is in a really symbiotic way with the existing uses and what's there. We're interested in being at the table and helping solve some of Wyoming's problems with funding education right now, and we want to help where we can. So this conservation leasing seems like a really straightforward way. The other side of that is that, hunting season's right around the corner. We have many members who have hunted that Munger Mountain parcel, who have seen it. I know of some friends of our org that are actually out-of-state hunters that are also looking at that as a place to hunt because it is closer to town. It's a little easier to access, and it has a lot of value to the hunting sort of public in this area. I would keep everything short. I think I would stand behind a lot of what Lisa McGee with the Wyoming Outdoor Council mentioned on pilot projects and looking at this as something that is outside of just Teton County. And I would stand for any questions.
Can you give your name, please?
Jess Johnson.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, thank you. Please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Josh Benton. I'm a professional naturalist with EcoTour Ventures. We're a tour operator in Grand Teton National Park. Before I speak on behalf of EcoTour Ventures, I wanted to mention that I'm one such hunter that has experienced the benefits of the Munger Mountain parcel. It's a beautiful spot in addition to, from a hunting perspective, in addition to wildlife watching and other forms of recreation and the ranching values as well. EcoTour Ventures is, as I mentioned, is a wildlife tour operator permittee of Grand Teton National Park and the also National Park. We have a staff of now over 20 people, serve close to 10,000 people annually. And the Kelly parcel, in addition to these other state trust parcels, are really important to the tourism industry in Wyoming, which is a wildlife tourism contributes to over 50% of the $1 billion wildlife recreation economy in the state. As we look at the value of these state trust parcels, it's really hard to think about how much value the Kelly parcel is, how much it's worth to wildlife, because animals are passing through this. They're using the national park, pronghorn antelope using the national park to spawn in the summer, and then migrating through that parcel on their way down to winter range. I've seen so many different species in those parcels. So I think we need to consider the bigger picture of what the impact of these parcels being developed will be on industries such as the tourism industry as we look forward. And I appreciate your consideration of creative approaches towards protecting this very special landscape. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments. One quick question on this, and I think we all recognize the wildlife value and things like that. I did not want to miss tourism is an important piece. One of the concerns we have is the ability for snowplow drivers, for example, to live in this valley. And if they have to commute from Alpine or from Victor, you may have a situation where your roads are going to be a long time before they get cleared. Does the tourism community, and I'm not asking you to speak for it, but are they looking at ways to solve those issues?
Yeah, I think local housing is a huge issue that this community is definitely dealing with, and I can't speak for my employer specifically, but it's a stressor that's making it difficult for all sorts of and manner of businesses to operate in this area. One thing that I will say, my employer was able to at least he was able to purchase a house with the specific intent of providing housing for guys, and that's something that we're really grateful for. He worked really hard for that. So, but that is an entirely additional issue that has been in the news a lot lately. Is how do we house the people that need to work and that live here and need to work here?
I guess
a question I have is, at some point in time, it'll probably happen in Teton County before it does other counties, is that, with wildlife, it's pretty easy for the game and fish to understand when an area is over hunted, and they basically regulate the number of hunters that go on that parcel to make sure that you have game management. And I can see at some point in time that you're going to have the possibility that we're going to have tourism operators management, because if there was 1,000 people in your business, on that section with 20 employees and all the people that would come on there, you would all be out of business because you would lose the value that's there. And I just say, as that capacity grows, I guess try to make sure you communicate with your legislators and with us about, when that resource is getting maxed out, so we know that we're not going to lose what we already have. So just for our benefit and yours as well. Thank you.
Thanks. If I may, one reason to continue preserving parcels such as the County parcel is the fact that there is such a small acreage of available area for wildlife watching. So keeping these places intact will help maximize wildlife populations and help allow for dispersed use and people to enjoy these resources. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of looking at the numbers of people that are coming and having to come up with a plan to deal with that. Just real quickly, one thing that EcoTour Ventures did is we founded Wildlife Tourism for Tomorrow earlier this year, which is an attempt to try and get tourism industry to try and start funding wildlife conservation and contributing to the cost of keeping the wildlife resources that we have here. And we're really hopeful that that's a step in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Leslie Peterson. I'm here as a citizen this morning. I felt a sort of moral imperative to come here, though I have no official capacity whatsoever. I have in the past. I noticed that there's a fair amount of concern about housing, which has been a problem in this county. I was a county commissioner from 1983 for 6 years. And during that time, housing was a huge problem then, and it hasn't changed. There's an absolutely inexhaustible demand to be in this county. And every trust funder in the world will try to buy a house here if they possibly can, unless it's deed restricted. And we've learned that the hard way. Many homes are under construction now, and the pandemic and other crowding issues have made it worse and worse, as you all know. But every organization in this community is working for housing, but we haven't forgotten that the crux of our county comprehensive plan is the town as heart. We want to have the density in the town and retain the values insofar as possible in the rural parts of the county. For the long run, the great values are scenic, wildlife, and recreation in this county. We're producing millions of dollars now for the school fund, when in the past, we were a recipient of the school foundation funds. We now are producing a great deal more than we ever took before. And that's only going to increase if we maintain the values that make this one of the most spectacular places in the world. I remember so well when we sold the Boyles Hill School section. I think it was the late 70s. And that 640 acres sold for $5 million. And we all thought, geez, that was a hell of a bundle for the state. What a good deal that was. Now, one little part of that, the hill part, doesn't have a house on it. It's very low density, but there's not a house on it that's worth less than $10 million. And there's a neighborhood below it that has helped accommodate the housing needs we have here. But how stupid that looks now, that sale, and that isn't that long ago. So to me, it's unthinkable that there would be anything but a conservation solution for the Kelly parcel. The idea of that thing sitting out there in the middle of the park and not being conserved is beyond the pale. I mean, that's a given. We have to figure that out. But it's a little more subtle and just as critical that we maintain at least that parcel on 390. It's hugely important for wildlife, for open space, for the character of this community. And we simply cannot let these things pass and look back in less than 50 years and say, how stupid was that? I honestly did not know until this morning that the land trust could do a term easement. And if nothing else, worst case, we should consider working together as a community to make sure that that property is protected for some period of time until we can see how things are developing, till we get through some of the terrible changes that we need to make as a society because of viral infections and global warming and some of the other things. So let's not do anything hasty here that will not be good for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Always good to hear from you, and I want to recognize your leadership in this community on many of these issues.
Thank you.
Over the years.
Hello, my name is Sharon Mader. I'm the Senior Program Manager in Wyoming for the National Parks Conservation Association. I want to thank you for making the trip to Jackson and for giving thoughtful consideration for the state lands parcels that are available here. I'm particularly interested in the final parcel within Grand Teton National Park, the Kelly parcel, and my organization has been involved with working to preserve all of these lands within the park for probably 13 years now. We're in it for the long haul, and I have to say I am just so appreciative of Governor Gordon's leadership and the resolve of the State Lands Board to preserve these parcels within Grand Teton National Park in perpetuity for the reasons that many of you have expressed here today. I am so appreciative, and with one remaining parcel, we would love to see the consensus among the State Lands Board to move forward with preservation of this very important landscape, important to wildlife, people, visitors, and our Wyoming economy. I would also like to acknowledge the steadfast and excellent work of the National Park Service and our current and past superintendents in really moving this project forward. I understand very clearly the need for revenue for the state school system, and my children have gone through that system, and it is excellent. And we have all been committed to ensuring that the state receives a fair and above share return of revenues to fund the school system. And at the same time, we would like you to keep in mind the irreplaceable natural values of these lands to our national park system. This is not just a Teton County issue. This is a national issue for our organization. It is the top acquisition priority for the National Parks Conservation Association across the country. So we strongly support your efforts, and thank you so much for continuing forward to preserve that property. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you very much for your comments, and also NBCA for their work on the antelope flocks issue, and hopefully there's work for that in the future. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Dan Schlager. I'm the Wyoming State Director for the Conservation Fund. Just to give you some context about the fund, it's a national organization and protected over 8 million acres around the country, and work with federal funding programs quite a lot and working on our partners' priorities. So providing just a little broader context and then some specific context also, because at the time of that conservation easement occurring with the board, I was working on land protection at the Jackson Land Trust. So just to begin, philosophically, while you have a huge burden, as many people have alluded to, in trying to build the fiduciary responsibility, part of what you're also doing, which is why you're here, is that part of that fiduciary responsibility is also that Wyoming is an amazing place and open, and part of the context of where that education for Wyoming school children happens is in this environment. And so if it were only about the financial portions, we really wouldn't be having these discussions at all. There's a broader context, and we're talking in Teton County about some of the greatest landscapes on earth. And so there are ways in which you get really close to that full value of both protecting, but providing funding for the school children, and at the same time protecting the environment. And on the Kelly parcel, the obvious solution there is for it to be part of Grand Teton National Park. That is a huge component of the economic driver here. It's one of the greatest landscapes on earth intact in the largest temperate ecosystem in the world. And so in terms of federal funding and what we see around the country is that this type of funding, the windows open and the windows closed, and being able to fund that. And when Antelope Flats occurred, it required all of the land and water conservation funding in the entire United States for the Park Service that year, as well as matching that with huge private funding. And with the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act last year, there's more funding there potentially for the park. The market here is quite high, obviously, and so there's an opportunity right now to perhaps get a very high value for that, and the park is very interested in that. And holding on to the land is also not without risk. It's not as if it goes up forever under every circumstance. We're all seeing the smoke in the air and all over the West, and a wildfire that could occur could impact that value for many, many decades if it were to tragically happen in that area. And so there's this moment in time that's a great time to potentially fund it, to become part of the park. And the park has huge positive economic impacts, as everybody has commented on here today, both in Teton County and for Wyoming. Moving for just a couple more comments about the conservation that occurred. At that time, the board, an earlier iteration of the board, decided to do that pilot project, as it was called, to do a conservation, to put a conservation easement in place on the 19 acres on the Snake River, which is adjacent to the park, because they felt that they could get maximum value, financial value, at the same time protect those resources. And so it was done in, I think it was 1988 or 1989 when that was completed, and that it was 97 or 98% of the fair market value, appraised value of that parcel. So that those funds have been at work in whatever the investments are for the state, earning money all that time. And you know, with the way the markets have gone in that period of time, it ought to have earned a pretty substantial return. At the same time, it's protected the wildlife values, where there are probably thousands upon thousands of people who float by that every day with views of the Teton, who are going on those types of floats and doing those kinds of activities, whether it's fishing or hunting. It's still agriculturally leased. That all that is contributing to the economics of the valley, which also through taxes and everything else come back to Wyoming. So the economic value that was created there is actually quite high, and it does balance both the economic and environmental outcomes there. And so that was why the board that you sit on decided to do that back then. And it is not a bad option for creating really high values, almost 100% of the value. If, for example, to take a really extreme point of view, if you could get maximum fair market value minus $1 on these parcels, I would surmise to say you probably would do that. Well, you're kind of doing that with a conservation easement. You're getting really, really close to full market value while protecting the wildlife values. And conservation leasing would probably create additional values, but it's not going to create on an impermanent basis. The funding would not be there to get anywhere close to the full values that you could through permanent protection, through LWCF funding, or whatever it is that would collect together to purchase that on behalf of Grand Teton National Park. And the community is really behind that, or to do a conservation easement that would also protect that and protect the economics. Thank you for a chance to comment.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks for the perspective on the easement.
My name is Story Clark, and my family came here in the early 20s, and I'm also a member of the Snake River Ranch family that leases Highway 399 and the Munger Mountain parcel. But I'd like to speak about a couple things. First of all, just following up on Dan Schlager's comments. We're in a crazy moment here in Teton County, as you guys well know, and you're probably thinking, okay, the audience wants wildlife, the audience wants scenic values, but we represent the schools. How are we going to pair those two? Well, we're at this crazy moment in Teton County, and as Dan said, it might go away, both for the Kelly parcel, but also for the other parcels, where there's a huge amount of money here that actually could work for you and provide you with compensation for protecting some of these key parcels, like the Highway 390 parcels. So there are solutions. The Land Trust has been working on solutions. I worked with Dan Schlager on the piece, the 19 acres and the conservation easement going to the state when I was working for the Land Trust years ago. And that solution was really fabulous for the state. There was never really any other great option for that parcel. And so why not get the money now and start investing it and investing it and investing it? And we're in a situation now in Teton County where we could actually come up with the money to do a similar kind of thing on the Highway 390 parcel. So I know we have to deal with, the law and the regulations regarding how we dispose of interests on those parcels. But this is a very unusual situation in Teton County where we can really have a win-win. And by win-win, I mean, you get the money, you get the wildlife, we get the tourism economy, you get the sales tax value from the tourism economy. Really, the money is there to protect these resources. So just like to point that out, and I think working with the Land Trust is a great way to do that. Just one other thing I'd like to speak to. As a member of the Snake River Ranch family, I just can't tell you how critical that school section is, in particular, the 390 school section is to our agricultural operation. It's absolutely essential. It sits in the middle. To actually get from one part of the ranch to another, we have to go through that school section. Otherwise, we're going to be stopping traffic on the road constantly to get our cattle across. There are many other aspects of that ranch, of that parcel, that are so important to us. But again, I want to recognize what you all have to do, which is get high economic value. And I think we really can do that for you, with you, working with the Jacksonville Land Trust. So I just would like to thank you. I think in general, you have been, actually not in general, always, you have been incredible stewards of the state lands here. And when you are faced with an issue on those state lands, I think you've solved them very creatively and well. And I just appreciate the work that your board has done and coming up to really dig in and try and solve these very complicated problems in good ways. But just remember, we have the financial resources to help you. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Story. One quick question for you, because I know you've been engaged in this. Your leadership on the land trust is remarkable and legendary. But wanted to ask you, because I know you've dealt with that as Leslie, that this housing issue that we worry about for teachers, for snowplow drivers, for people that this community needs.
Yeah, thank you. And as Leslie and Turner, both Turner Reeser both said, the community is acutely aware of that. And there's constant work to improve the situation for workers in Teton County. In addition, there are options that we could discuss, but it is super important that we not sort of sprinkle housing everywhere, because it just is more of a drain and a stress on the resources to have little bits of development. We need to really consolidate it where there are services, where we can get fire trucks easily to them, et cetera. So that's really important. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't pieces of state land, and I'm thinking of the one by the town, that might be perfect for some housing. And there also are other parcels that are not developed in the town and in other nodes that would be perfect for affordable housing. So we have not finished our job there as a community in terms of providing housing, and we know that. So it's just not sprinkling it around in state school sections that are removed from services may not be the best solution to that problem. So thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Chris Colligan. I'm the Wildlife Coordinator for Greater Yellowstone Coalition and a community member here in Jackson. I've greatly valued my experiences on these properties, as you've heard from many of our community members here today, very eloquently have said what value they have to our community. I'm also a parent of two small children that are about to enter the K-12 system, and so I recognize your conundrum to fund the school system here. There's been so much attention today on the Kelly parcel and 390 parcel. I won't make any further comments on that, but I did have a good sidebar with Jason during the break that as we think about the other parcels across the state, as well here in Teton County, that are adjacent to Forest Service lands and maybe a little more inaccessible or obscure. The state has a program right now for habitat leasing that it exercises with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And on those lands that Game and Fish has all of the surrounding land, like WHMAs over near DuBois and other places, those state parcels are providing revenue to the state school system at a higher rate today than some of the other leases that occur. And I think that's a tool that we could look at here in this community, and as well as Lisa described, the efforts of WALK to put together a summary of those documents, other parts of the state that have high wildlife values. These lands here in Teton County, almost any of the lands are going to have tremendous wildlife value, as you've heard. In addition to migrations, there are also important winter ranges. And that's exactly what those WHMA habitat leases have protected in other parts of the state, where you're receiving revenue at a pretty high rate to help pay for those wildlife values. So I just want to say that this is an unprecedented. I think you have a community here that's willing to work with you and come up with solutions. I can't thank my neighbors and community members enough for the great comments that you heard today. And I'll leave it at that, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mark Berry, Grand Teton National Park Foundation. Really glad that you're here. We're a partner to Grand Teton National Park, and we are really hopeful that you will see the alignment with the Park Service with respect to the Kelly parcel that we also see. Right now, the Park Service seems to be in a place where they could potentially bring forward land and water conservation funds to purchase that. I was very encouraged to hear the deputy director say that one of the major considerations is trying to get that direct authority to have a transaction directly with the Park Service. I hope that you'll continue to pursue that. With respect to the 2016 purchase of the Antelope Flats property, our partner was not able to obtain 100% of the funds for that transaction through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And so working with other partners, we were able to bring matching funds to that to be able to purchase from the state for $46 million, the 640 acre parcel. We don't know if that would be the flow of a deal in the future for this particular parcel, but within the context of the deal that you do work out and the park's ability to get those funds, we will certainly consider that kind of support going forward. So thank you. I'm glad you're here touring the parcels today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Pam Larkin. I'm a resident here in Wilson, and I wanted to thank you also for being here and also for giving us the opportunity for this really very interesting conversation. I'm very supportive and understand the need to generate revenue for schools, as well as at the same time conserving these beautiful lands for all of us to enjoy and to provide habitat for wildlife. I came today hoping for some creative thinking about how we might find solutions to all of this. And I'm really excited about this idea of the conservation leasing. I was not familiar with that before. I see it as a potential to help sort of address this growing population that we have and a growing interest in outdoor activity and recreating in the natural world, I think nationally and globally. And I think that this is a potential to be a model, to look at how we might kind of address this growing pressure to how you maintain natural lands while allowing people to enjoy the area. I think that is an opportunity for the state to be very forward thinking and look into ways of achieving both goals, and that you could be a model for others both across the country and globally, just as Colorado in a way is doing for us today, looking to them for ideas on how to sort of solve these kinds of problems. So anyways, I'm just excited that we're having this conversation and that there's an opportunity there to be more forward thinking and creative in how we solve it. And I just wanted to add one last thing about the Munger Mountain parcel, is that parcel is adjacent to Forest Service land, Wilderness Study Area land, Jackson Hole Land Trust land, and it provides a really important corridor between the Snake River and that upper Forest Service lands that run to the west, thousands of acres up in the mountains there in the Wilderness Study Area, and that there's a lot of wildlife that use that corridor currently. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share.
Thank you very much.
John Resor, can speak for Shooting Star, a member of the Snake River Ranch families, but just wanted to speak on Shooting Star and how a balanced solution I think could work here.
If you recall, historically, in the year 2000, the land board was considering a very intense development proposal on the Village Road school section. It involved a golf course and a lot of housing. And our family, we worked closely with the land board back then, and were able to come to a solution where we agreed to develop some of our land at Teton Village. And part of that solution was a transfer fee that went to the land trust. So every time a home or property sells at Shooting Star, 1% of the value goes to the land trust. That's raised about $5 million for the land trust. Now, the language of that conservation easement said that those funds had to go to protection of the village corridor, of the corridor that we're all trying to protect right now. So it was a balanced solution in that sense. And then in terms of the workforce housing, which I've heard Governor Gordon and the rest of you concerned about, and we're very concerned as well. So we at Shooting Star, we've actually built 50 units of employee housing, employee/affordable houses about 130 people. But we're only 1/3 of the way there. The master plan calls for housing for 375 people. So we're about 1/3 of the way there. But the success of the development at Shooting Star has brought in a lot of residents, property owners who are totally supportive of a conservation solution on that school section. So not only do I represent the Shooting Star company, but I represent 5 homeowners associations at Shooting Star. And I can assure you, uniformly, the residents are for a conservation solution, whether that's an easement or a term easement, which seems more realistic. I think you would find a lot of, a lot of financial support for that solution on the village road. And it really goes hand in hand with the workforce housing, because as you develop, there's a requirement to build the housing. So you can really end up with a solution that protects the village road and gets a lot of housing built for the working community in Jacksonville. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Commissioners and board, thank you for being here, and thank you to all of our elected officials that are here, and state and county staffers that are working on these issues. Teton County is incredibly complex. First of all, my name is Jared Becker, Executive Director of the Snake River Fund. The Snake River Fund has balanced promoting and protecting public access to the Snake River corridor here in Western Wyoming while maintaining good stewardship. And I think that that's a perfect example of what you are challenged to do. You are challenged to provide opportunities for funding, but also maintain sound stewardship. And this concept of conservation leasing is a tremendous opportunity. In fact, this county and this valley is a great example of it on a large scale. There's some really fine scale opportunities here between the private philanthropy, the direct adjacent landowners, the complex organizations, nonprofit organizations working to put this forward. You have some tremendous opportunities. And I encourage you to look at some of these smaller parcels that are along the Snake River corridor. There's 3 of them that are adjacent to Bureau of Land Management parcels. Those parcels are currently in play for transfer to Teton County ownership. There have been some proposals submitted to you that encourage leasing while maintaining public access, but also providing open space and wildlife habitat. And I think, Lisa McGee suggested that there's an opportunity to pilot this elsewhere in the state, but there's a real opportunity right adjacent to the Pine Meadows subdivision, BLM parcel, a state parcel, and willing participants that are willing to fund short-term leases to keep those spaces open. And I think that you have a choice to make and say, okay, let's start small. Let's see where we can do this. Let's see where we can take those private funds, maintain value for those adjacent landowners, protect open space, protect wildlife habitat, and protect recreation. And And so I just really encourage you to not only think about the big parcels, they're important, they're very, very important to our economy and our wildlife and our culture here, but look at those small parcels right now. Tremendous, tremendous opportunity. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming to Teton County. It's wonderful to be here. And think about all the creative energy in this room right now to think about solutions to move forward. That's something that we get when we're in person. And so I'm very, very grateful for your time being here.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there others that would like to address the board?
Thank you. This is Mark Newcomb again with the Teton County Commission. I'll speak more personal comments and just following up, since we have a little bit more time, about the workforce and about the needs for essential workers. We are very aware of that, and we don't feel like exactly that we're doing enough yet. And what I think is worth pondering is, are we digging the hole deeper when we look at these state land parcels? Again, when Leslie Peterson mentioned the Boyles Hill parcel and the $10 million+ houses, those are requiring a bunch of workers. Potentially the glamping use might require a bunch of workers. Those workers are going to compete with the snowplow drivers, with the teachers, with the nurses for housing. And so that's what we're very aware of. We've undertaken, it hasn't started yet, but over the next year, maybe a little bit more, we have a consultant that will be doing a very detailed analysis of what kind of housing needs are we creating as we put different uses throughout the county. So we'll have that information coming. I don't know, how that meshes with this time frame, but hopefully it meshes pretty well so that you can be informed about various uses and what kind of employment needs they're going to have and what kind of impacts that has on the workforce housing. And so just one final statistic, sadly with COVID, we've seen our houses that were at $800,000, $900,000 somewhat attainable for our workforce. Now those are bumped up to anywhere from $1.5 to $2.5 million. You look at Cottonwood Park, you look at Raptor J, the bastions of our workforce housing, those are now going for $2 million. So we just have to be real careful about how many how many new jobs we're creating, and are those jobs competing with the housing that we need for our essential workers.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you really for putting a point on that. I mention it repeatedly because I know in the conversations that have come up over the years, there has been a lot of discussion about should we use state lands to provide housing for, essentially, it's more than affordable housing. It's just basically our teachers, our snowplow drivers, the ambulance crews, and those sorts of things. And I know Senator and the representatives have been party of those conversations. It's nice to hear from this audience. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the commissioners coming to the microphone, and perhaps my question is more for the commission at large versus the particular topic that he spoke to today, and that is, one thing that I've had difficulty tracking down, but I'm really curious about, is a list of sales within a half a mile of the state sections, like maybe over the last year, last 3 years, last 5 years.
Can we lost your volume just a second ago, so you might start after, thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, we'll try this again. Mr. Chairman, I can see you, and so if you would raise your hand if you lose my audio, and I'll spare you my mouth moving. And for the record, I'm not on mute. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. My question is much more specific to the commission at large and not the commissioner's specific remarks. And that is, I wonder if we might from the county get a list of the sales within a half mile of the school sections that we're discussing today over the last 3 years. I'd be particularly interested in the sales within 100 feet, 500 feet, and a half mile of those school sections that we're discussing. I think fair market value, which has come up a lot in addition to conservation today, is a little bit nebulous in Teton County. So I'd really like to see some comparators of other land sales or property sales in the vicinity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brief response. The chair and I will be departing here to go to our Board of Equalization appeal hearings. So we will bring that up with our assessor, and I'll bet we can provide that information. If you want, it might help us to just write that down for us, shoot us a quick email or something, and we'll make sure we know exactly what we're needing to provide for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner.
Very good. Are there other comments? We have one from.
Hi, I'll keep it brief. Hi, I'm Avery Lindsay, and I'm a 4th generation member of the Snake River Ranch family as well. So first, I just wanted to thank you all again, as everyone has, not only for coming to see these lands, but also for your work stewarding these lands all over the state. I was lucky to be born and raised here in Wyoming, and have been a beneficiary of the K-12 education system, and also of the state lands that are open to the public all over the state. And I see your work, and I'm very impressed with the huge responsibility that you hold for the current generations and the generations to follow. So thank you for all the work that you do. I did just want to make a comment on the 390 parcel, in saying how important it is not only to wildlife corridors, to grizzly bear migration of many different animals, but also to the agricultural character of Teton County and of the state. And I think that one of the most amazing things about Wyoming is how we have held on, and it's taken a lot of work, but held on to the agricultural and traditional uses of our lands. And I think that makes us different than a lot of other places. And when tourists from all over the world come here to see Grand Teton, to see Yellowstone, to see the Wind River Mountains all over, they also get to learn about that history and how we're preserving that and how that is still a part of our economy. And I think a parcel like 390, when you're driving up to the park, like the parcel on 390, really shows that, and I think us being able to lease that for our ranch and have that as an integral part of our ranch is crucial for our operation, as well as for the education and the tourism that the tourists that support this valley. Let me see if I had any other thing. No, that's basically it. As was mentioned before, the state land is right in the middle of our ranch, so moving cattle will be very difficult if that is put to other use. And I think that there's some brilliant minds here. There's been incredible comments throughout the morning, and I think there are creative solutions that we can make this work for all of us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Avery. Thanks very much. Any other comments? Madam Director, I don't see any. I'll turn this back to you. Let me thank everyone for being here today. Of course, we're available for conversations. Thanks again for the staff. Chip and Craig, thank you very much for the auditorium here and the opportunity. Madam Director.
Mr. Chairman, I think on the agenda, we have a little bit of time, maybe about 5 minutes, if any of the other board members wanted to make any comments or have any further discussion about what we've been considering today.
Thanks for the turnout, because a lot of times we'll go to these things, and there might be 2 or 3 people in the audience, so we really appreciate the community spirit, and I think there's a lot of opportunities that were discussed today that we can all get together and start working on some good results.
I would just briefly say thank you for the turnout as well. And I think the thing that I like the most is your appreciation of the position that we're in. And it's not really just unique to Teton County. Certainly in respect to preserving the view shed, it perhaps is, but you should know that we face other very difficult decisions when it comes to, for example, leasing for wind energy. And people in the eastern half of the state who don't want perhaps us to put windmills on state land because it'll ruin their view shed and a very scenic area to them. I would argue that it's probably not as scenic as it is in Teton County, but I can say that because I'm from Goshen County, the eastern part of the state. I appreciate Teton County very much. But we have these struggles to balance the needs of everybody in all kinds of different contexts. And I so appreciate that you appreciate the position we are in and all of your input today. It's invaluable for us to know what types of solutions that are palatable to you and things that we can move forward on and try to be creative and to the extent we can satisfy as many of the wants and desires as possible. That's not always possible, won't be possible. Not everyone will always be happy, but if we all give our level best, I think that's the best we can do. So thank you very much.
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, and following up on Ed's comments just a bit, I think what has been especially helpful for me today is occasionally we are in receipt of public testimony that is kind of like, just don't change anything, just keep it the way it is. And that's not a good option, and I think you all recognize that. So I think what was so helpful for me today was prioritization and useful discussions, and I think those will continue about, okay, well, what, of all this suite of trust land we have here, if we did develop it, which parcels, might be opportune for that, which should absolutely be taken off the table. And so that's what I find really, really helpful. And so I sympathize with those statements sometimes that we receive, just don't change anything, just keep it the way it is. But I appreciate the recognition in the room that that's not really a good option for us. So that more in-depth commentary is really helpful.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Mr. Chairman, if you're unable to hear me, please just raise your hand and I'll stop moving my mouth. I have 2 brief comments to make. But before I do that, I'd just like to thank the community, the Teton County community for coming out in force today and speaking on behalf of our treasured land in Wyoming. We echoing my colleagues, we appreciate that you appreciate the position that we're in. I believe one speaker called it unenviable, and I think we would all agree today. Teton County is unique in many ways, but maybe not unique in some of the perspective that we need to take as board members, and that is understanding that we have an obligation to see our state lands appreciate and earn money for the children of Wyoming. I see that while Teton County is unique, we also have an opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that this serves as sort of a pioneering endeavor for us to better maximize or optimize our earnings on state lands. And so as we make these decisions and have these discussions about Teton County, they also spill over into all of our treasured state sections in Wyoming. The second thing is that I feel like the discussion today moved really to to conservation, which is very, very important. But I really want to focus all of our dialogue on the fact that we're not just talking about A, no conservation, or B, conservation. There's a lot of space in between there. So again, just reiterating or underscoring that our job is to see this land appreciate, and our job is to see the optimization of our revenue off of these lands. I appreciate the conversation about conservation, and perhaps that's where it will lead us. But there are many, many other options, and I appreciate the Wyoming legislature and the office of the office staff for putting together such a thorough report that we all received, and that included so many innovative proposals. And it took quite a lot of risk for some of those proposers to lay out their proposals, and I don't want those to be lost in the discussion. I think there's a lot of merit to that. So again, just focusing a little bit away from conservation as being the only way to go in this, and the board's focus on many opportunities to see this land appreciate and earn money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to say one more quick thing, and I thought this was maybe universally understood, but a few of the comments made me concerned that it's not. With multiple commenters said, "Gosh, we should really move forward with a potential transfer to the federal government or a sale to the federal government." And I just want to state this out loud, very, very clear, and Deputy Crowder said this as well. We cannot do that on our own. That has to come through a legislative process and a legislative bill. And so for the folks that are supporting that, there was a bill last session and it went down in fabulous fashion, as Representative Schwartz mentioned. And I was in the committee where that one of those votes was taken. And so I think just a pre-warning for those folks that are supporting that, you got to get down to Cheyenne and pack those committee rooms, because it was not close. It was not even close. So I just wanted to really state that probably everybody knew, but I wanted to say it out loud anyway.
And to put a fine point on that, Leslie, I think you brought up, you are now a recapture district, just like Campbell and Sblc. So Teton is now producing more than it's taking for the school. So thank you for pointing that out.
And Mr. Chairman, Cheyenne is really nice in February.
Before we close the meeting, Jason, was there anything else that you wanted to say? Well, thank you all very much. This kind of concludes this portion of the meeting. We still have our tour for the invited guests this afternoon, but thanks for making your views known and for showing up. And as it just occurred to me, I didn't formally introduce myself in the beginning. I'm Jennifer Scoggin. I'm the director of the Office of State Lands. And Jason and I are around. So as we progress through some of these development possibilities, whether it's conservation, whatever it is, we're around. So feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help facilitate communication to the board and otherwise. So with that, I guess we are concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.